You don't actually want your college counselor to push you or your child towards Ivy League schools. I know, the idea of an Ivy is very appealing, but that's all it is, an idea. Zeroing in on any one school simply because it's an Ivy can dramatically limit your potential. By the end of this episode, you're going to walk away with a much more effective process for building out a list of schools that you actually want to apply to. We'll be busting a few myths about what it means to actually attend an Ivy League university. I'll walk you through some signs that the Ivy you've got your sights set on might not make sense for you. And then we'll be ending with my 3 yeses and nos process I take students through to find the most aligned school for them. Because here's the thing, an Ivy League university might be right for you, but we won't know until we go through this process. If you want to go even deeper with this process, you'll get a custom college list built out with our team at the advisory in the admissions roadmap. If you take anything from this episode, it should be that you should never take blanket advice from anyone and always question whether the advice you're getting is best for you as an individual or serving someone else's institutional priorities. At the advisory, you're always the number one priority. There are 3 main reasons that people are drawn to Ivy Leagues. Let's get into it. Number 1, increased earning potential post-graduation. Number 2, reputation. And 3, networking opportunities. Let's bust a couple of myths around these motivations. First, going to an Ivy League university might not immediately increase your future earning potential. A recent study from Harvard economists found that grads of the Ivy League schools and equivalents are 60% more likely to have incomes among the top 1% compared to those who didn't attend these colleges. This sounds really enticing. It sounds like a no-brainer to try to go to one of these schools or send your child to one by default if you want them to be high earners. But the so-called Ivy Plus colleges, the 8 Ivies along with MIT, Stanford, Duke, and U Chicago, accept children from the 1%, more than twice the rate of any other income group who scores similarly on the ACT or SAT. So you can't take that stat to mean that going to an Ivy actually increases your child's chances of success and of being in the top 1% by 60%. The fact is, many students are already entering schools in that bracket and would sort of have a similar outcome had they attended another university. Now, there are more nuances to get into this research. If you want to look it up, you can Google Raj Chetty, who's an economist at Harvard, who has a lot of data and research on this topic. But this is the core takeaway, that a lot of students and families create this correlation that the data doesn't actually back up. Let's get into myth number 2. Just because your school counselor said you should apply early decision to an Ivy or a friend, or you watched a video on YouTube, doesn't mean that you should. There are institutional priorities at every high school, especially if you or your child attends a top private school where the institution is pushing forward and recommending certain students, and their recommendations to you may be based on the institution's priorities rather than what best serves you as an individual. High schools also have their own priorities, and sometimes they're in alignment, sometimes they're not. Students also tend to start meeting with their college counselor in 11th grade when you're already at the tail end of the admissions process. The college admissions process really begins at the tail end of 8th grade, right as you're starting high school, as the decisions you are making for your child in that time, like in 8th and 9th grade, will kind of shape the trajectory of their experience throughout high school. College is a huge commitment. It's a big financial investment. It's somewhere that you're going to live and breathe for 4 to 6 years. The average graduation rate is not actually 4 years. And so this isn't a decision you want to make just based on the recommendation of YouTube or a Reddit thread or something you overheard at a cocktail party. Let's take an example from a real advisory client. We'll call her student X. She went to a selective boarding school in California, and her counselor was really pushing Dartmouth. Now, she did not know much about Dartmouth. Her parents went to college abroad in India and immigrated here into the US as adults. So they knew the brand name of Dartmouth. They were very excited about this. And all in all, the student and her family had not done much research into the school. Well, this was a student who wanted to be a doctor, who'd also gone to a predominantly white institution her entire career as a student and felt really out of place for a number of reasons. Dartmouth just was not the right school for her. It wasn't the right environment. She also wanted to be somewhere that was more urban, having gone to boarding school and having been sort of sequestered away in this small academic setting for most of her life. And so her school counselor was really pushing her to early decision to Dartmouth and to get a specific score on the ACT when this really wasn't aligned with her goals. As we started working together and I got to know her better, and we also got into what her priorities were, this became quite clear. So this student was pretty sure she wanted to be a doctor. She came from a medical family. Her father was a doctor. She had worked for him and seen him grow his business and was quite certain that this was the path she wanted to take. Well, there are some specific programs. My favorite one is called Early Assurance, where you can apply to medical school in your sophomore year of college. At some schools, you're allowed to skip the MCAT, which is like a version of the SAT, but requires a lot of studying and time and effort and prep. And so imagine if you're able to get a decision about med school in your sophomore year of college, how much time, money, energy, and stress that would save you. Well, not all schools have early assurance. It's a very niche program. And so we wanted to find a college that would give her the experience she wanted and also open the door for this pathway to go to medical school that would make things much easier. And we settled on Tufts, which is an incredible university in the Boston area that offered everything she was looking for. And ultimately, she applied early to Tufts, got into Tufts against the recommendation of her school counselor because he was really more focused on they wanted a student from her class to go to Dartmouth and no one else was applying, and they were going to push her towards this certain path. So it's really important to cultivate your muscle of discernment or decision making and do your own research. The third myth that I want to bust is that you'll have the strongest network at an Ivy League. Well, this is not true if the college isn't designed in a way that's conducive to your mental health and non-negotiables. Students often also tend to sort of congregate within groups of people they're familiar with. So while you may build a strong network at an Ivy, if you're really at a school that's not the right environment for you and you're really struggling to fit into that environment, to go to class, to meet the requirements of the work, you're not going to be able to have the sort of energy to socialize. So this is often misguided and is really a benefit you can only take advantage of if that school happens to be the right one for you. So how do you spot this obsession with Ivy Leagues early on and diagnose whether it's a problem or not? Well, whether you've been given bad advice from a college counselor or just had your eyes on a specific school for years, maybe it's a parent's alma mater or it's just been the subject of your fantasies, here's what can happen. First is the sunk cost fallacy. Now, you may sink thousands of dollars into a summer program at one of these universities, thinking that it's going to help secure your chances of getting into the school, when that's not actually how most of these summer programs work, and often they're run by third-party companies. 2, you could throw all of your time and resources trying to hack the system to get into a specific school that you're fixated on, and no matter how stellar your grades are, nothing is going to guarantee you get in, and there may be another school that's actually more in alignment for you. And it may also happen to be an Ivy League university. Granted, I'm saying this all as a graduate student at Harvard. This is really important just to understand and discern, as I see so many of our clients come to us after working their whole life to get into one specific school, and then they don't get in, and then want to come to us and ask what to do next. And that is a very expensive and challenging and emotionally and draining process if you have spent years and years of your life focused on one specific goal that may not even be in alignment for you. Second is tension between parents and children. If you're listening to this as a parent or child, you have a limited time with your teenager at home, and that can be a time of joy and relationship cultivating, or it can be a time of arguing and fighting. And so no school is really worth the amount of division that's created when there's a misalignment here. So it's really important to understand who is your child? What are their natural gifts, skills, and talents? And what can you as a parent do to cultivate those and to help your child find an environment that's going to continue to cultivate those skills, especially in a rapidly changing world where the nature of work is drastically changing due to AI. So the kinds of experience you had as an undergraduate and entering the workforce, if things are going to look completely different for your child. Third is lack of clarity about the actual curriculum and experience of being a student. So there are so many nuances to colleges like core curriculum. What is a core curriculum? Well, many universities have requirements of specific classes that you must take, and some have something called open curriculum where there are no requirements, and then there's everything in between. So while you might be obsessed with a certain college, a certain Ivy that you've seen on TV, etc., do you know what kind of curriculum they offer? How are you assessed? Are students doing projects? Is there real world learning? Or are assessments all based on traditional exams and that's not your strong suit? Does the core curriculum align with the way you learn best? These areas of research, now this is just like a couple of points. There's so much more nuance to this, but it's really important to sort of dig in before making this pivotal, costly decision that's going to shape the rest of your child's life. So if this sounds like what you're going through and you have thoughts of Ivies swirling in your head from Gilmore Girls or YouTube or Reddit or books, just know that one of these schools may be right for you. You or your child may end up there, and it may not be right. And there are thousands of other colleges and universities that may be more in alignment. How can you actually make sure you're building out a list of colleges for the application process that makes sense for you and are not just based purely on a school's reputation? First, I'd invite you to ask yourself why you're stuck on the idea of this school. What is it about this school specifically that intrigues you so much? And be honest with yourself about the answer. Second, I'd like you to go through the 3 yeses and nos process. This is something I learned from the psychologist, Dr. Gay Hendricks, who is actually on the next episode of the podcast. So very excited for you to hear more from him. What you want to do is get out a notebook, draw a vertical line down the center. On the left side, write 3 absolute yeses. On the right, 3 absolute nos. And make a list of only 3. It's important that there are only 3 make or break preferences. These can be things like location. Is it essential that you're in a city? Maybe you're an international student and you need to have access to like diverse cuisine and you need to be in an urban environment. Maybe you want a traditional college experience that's more rural. Have you ever lived somewhere like that? Maybe diversity is one of your non-negotiables. Maybe there's a level of diversity you didn't experience in high school, like the student I mentioned. It's really important for you to experience in college, for you to see other students who look like you on campus. Maybe specialized programs like early assurance, for example. If you know that you want to become a doctor and there's a clear pathway for you to save time and money and resources and make that goal more likely to happen, given how competitive medical school admissions are. Is there a niche interest you'd like to explore? Are you comfortable with a class schedule that's already laid out for you? Are you able to graduate early? Like, there are all sorts of questions. You really want to get clear on what are your 3 absolute yeses, 3 absolute nos, and then make sure that every college on your list meets this criteria, and if not, be ruthless about editing that list. Once you go through this process, you might find that an Ivy League university fits all of your criteria, but I'd urge you not to settle on the idea of any school before going through this process. And if you're coming up against a lot of resistance and indecision when you sit down to do this exercise, reach out to our team at the advisory and let's do it together. In the admissions roadmap, you get strategic planning and individual counseling throughout the entire admissions and application process with hands-on support. Roadmap students work with us anywhere from 4 months to 4 years, depending on when they begin. I'll see you next week to chat about how to find your genius zone with Dr. Gay Hendricks, a renowned psychologist. It's an episode I'm very excited for and will be such a treat for you.